And welcome to John and James Live. My name is John Hastings and I'm with my co-host, Mr. James CeeLo. How are you today, James?
Well, it's been a while, mate, isn't it? I expect everybody had thought that we disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I had a nice little trip to the south of France, as you do.
Very nice, mate. Very nice.
It was very, very nice. Bit of a contrast coming back. It's nature, missing nature, James.
It was a culture shock, mate. I know you were out in the wilderness, weren't you? And then you're back in the smoke.
Yeah, and the Pyrenees Mountains.
Concrete jungle.
Oh man, you really do feel it once you get out there in nature. Coming back, it's a tricky adjustment. I need to change my lifestyle, I think, James. But today, sir, we are going to be talking about: are we heading for World War III? There's a lot going on at the moment, isn't there, James? We've got the Ukraine-Russian war, which I had high hopes for Mr. Trump. I know people will think I'm absolutely stupid, but I thought his ego was going to sort of take over and he will have to get this done, wrapped up and finished. But it seems like it's got worse, hasn't it? It's escalated in Ukraine, Russia. Now we've got Iran, Israel, Palestine. We've got the Taiwan thing in America and China. Everybody's up in their military spend, aren't they? Like the UK are, the US stats, we'll go through them today, is incredible. Are you feeling that, James, or are you sort of out of the loop in terms of watching the news or thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, you hear snippets. I mean, I've said this before that I haven't been engaging in watching the news for a long time. Really for a coping mechanism, I think, for me to be able to control what I can control. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword because you stay out of the loop and it could be sort of apathy and ignorance, or it's self-preservation. And I'd like to think it's self-preservation, but I think we all have a responsibility to know what is going on in the world to a greater or lesser degree. But going back to your point about Trump, I think he's massively underestimated the task at hand. I think maybe he oversimplified it. And these things are never simple. And it comes down to negotiation, doesn't it? That two people come to the table to negotiate, and they've got the weight of a nation on their shoulders to come out with a result that everybody's going to be happy with. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And these situations go back many, many years. It's not just something that's happened. It's created out of, hundreds of years of discontent and wrangling and, the past, that something happened that's been carried through now to the future. And maybe it's been taken out of context. Maybe it's lost something in translation. And what it represents now is not what it represented originally. But people hold on to that sentiment. And it's then these factions that won't give any section in terms of compromise because they hold on to those beliefs.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I know I totally resonate with what you're saying in terms of like not getting into the negativity, not watching the news, kind of focusing on your own life. But maybe when everybody does that en masse, that's why we have like global conflict. When people don't actually stand up for their community, say they're not going to do stuff, that's when you do have people joining the military, just using it as a job, following orders. The normal person doesn't really get involved. Then you do have the people who are potentially psychotic that start to run things from the top, and everybody's following suit because firstly, you could have been in the army, couldn't you, James? There was a point where you was potentially going to join the Navy. What was your thought process behind that? And do you regret not going in?
Yeah, I mean, it was sold to me by my stepfather that it was a way of seeing the world at the taxpayer's expense. That was his line. And, you know, it was a real potential thing that was going to happen. Up until about the age of 17, I was going to join up. But I just decided that, you know, whether it was I didn't want to be away from home, I didn't want to have that sort of discipline anymore because I'd had it for 8 years from school because I went to a naval college. And I guess I had reached that point, and you don't know what you want at that age generally, but I was pretty convinced up until that point. And whether it was my narrative or my stepfather's narrative that that's what I was going to do, but if ever I met anybody, I'd say, yeah, I'm going in the Navy. So I kind of set that as my ambition up until that point of reaching about 17, 18. And I was like, no, I'm too young to make that kind of decision. So, yeah, it was close, but I don't know there was any real danger of me joining up, to be honest.
What was the fear of going in? Was it fear of actually fighting, or just you didn't want to go away?
I think it was the going away, the discipline, the loss of freedom, possibly. I kind of saw it in that way that, you know, you'd be posted away for a long period of time. Yeah, I guess after being at boarding school for that long, I craved some sort of normality and community and stability. And I don't know that the Navy represented that for me, I think.
Yeah, because we can see, James, in the last few decades, especially with Hollywood, it could be quite glamorous to think about joining the army for a young man, can't it? You see, you know, war films of war heroes. There's a lot of status driven towards it. You've got like the Rambo type of films, the Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's always this army guy, you know, walking out the sea. The whole James Bond thing is very fighting army-ish. Any sort of film now, like action film, is I find most of the modern films absolutely rubbish, but then most of them are like just killing every 2 seconds, isn't it? It's just ridiculous.
But going back to what you were saying, so any regrets? I think for me, possibly it was that sort of band of brothers, that community, the bond that you'd have with the people you were serving with. I did, when I was in my early 20s, I considered being a retained firefighter. And, you know, I thought seriously about that. And again, it's the same situation that you're in a sort of a dangerous environment, which brings people together, you know, really, really strongly. I think if there's a possibility that you may lose your life, there's a lot at stake. You know, you're putting your life literally on the line. And I kind of regret that. Probably is the only regret that I have. But I think that everything else outweighed that, possibly. But yeah. Interesting, though, mate.
Yeah, I think the glamorization will, you know, quickly come to a realization if you actually go and fight in a real war.
Glamorous.
Then it's really gonna hit home. Most people come back with PTSD. You know, a lot of ex-military people on the streets of London, homeless, mental health problems. Yeah, you've got the you know, the camaraderie, but when that ends, and you don't even know really, you're not really involved in the reason for why you're fighting. You're following orders. You're just like a killing. You're a part of a killing team, aren't you? You're a robot. It's not really. Yeah, we can say it's defense, but realistically, it's not that glamorous at all. And for personally, I'm not going to say who it is, but you know, I've had family members that have been in countries that have drafted people to war, and somebody close to me was nearly drafted, because of working in a health sector, and we had to move them out of the country. So to be, I know what people were saying, like, I don't want to get involved. This is not my bag. It's happening somewhere else. But it's not until it happens on your doorstep that you think, wow, this is crazy. And this is a person that's like got nothing to do with, military. It's not military at all. It's more health sector. Plus, I was there on the edge of Iran when there was a conflict at the Nagorno-Karabakh. I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but there was conflicts there on the edge of Armenia there, where lots of people moved out. And I was sort of driving on the road, and then there was just hundreds and hundreds of fleets of cars that had been, with people's whole lives on top of their cars. Sofas, clothes, kids driving out of this war zone. And it was just, it was a real eye-opener, because these people are driving towards nowhere. They're leaving literally homeland and driving towards just escape. There's nowhere to go. I mean, you just imagine,
we're both parents. You think if you've got young children and you've been displaced from everything with no certainty, with danger, and the real possibility you might die. I mean, we are so far removed from that situation in where we are. And to your point, it's like if it was happening on our doorsteps, we'd all be very focused on it. But because it's happening so far away and it doesn't impact us directly, or it feels like it doesn't impact us directly, that we have the luxury of not paying attention.
Yeah.
And focusing on our own, shit that we're dealing with. But like if it was happening right here, then you don't have a choice. But you just imagine being in a situation where you've been invaded and everything is destroyed. Everything you've worked for, built, familiar with, is just taken away from you. And it's beyond your control.
It's a tricky situation. And then it comes down to, you've got sons of what they would call fighting age. Would you be happy for them to be called up to a war overseas?
No, not even remotely.
It comes into question, does it, about patriotism for a country? I know people say, look, they want to fight for their country, but then you think, okay, what is my country? Is it just a bunch of 0.1% elites that control 99% of things that are going on, and old men in boardrooms sending millions of young people to their deaths?
Yeah.
Do I want to be a drone and be sent out to be, cannon fodder for some rich person who's organizing all of this military stuff going on, the military spend, and then trying to convince people it's all about defense? Like, do people on the on the streets really want to fight each other? You reckon there's that much of a grievance? Every time I go to a different country, like, the people on the street, have they really got that much of a grievance with each other, or is it people at the top?
When you look back through history, it's all about propaganda, isn't it? The way in which this thing is spun, that it's our freedoms that are being eroded and are under threat. And if we allow this to happen, what else is possible? If we don't nip this in the bud right now. So the call to action is pretty much based around that, isn't it? It's, our sense of nationalism, identity is being threatened, and we have to come together, unite against a common enemy. And it will be wrapped up in any way, shape, or form that it needs to be to mobilize a nation to action. So if it comes down to, territorial gain for financial profit, it's like, well, is that worth fighting for? But it will never be spun like that. It'll be, this is now encroaching on your freedoms. You know, this is your
Yeah.
birthright that's being threatened.
It's a
And these are the
tricky-
people that are doing it, that I have no right to come and you know, it's a fascinating situation to observe, that we have the luxury of looking at as an overview. You know, when you're in it, it's a very different matter. But when you can sit back sort of dispassionately to an extent and say, well, what is the situation? It looks very different, doesn't it, from up above?
It definitely does. You know, my grandfather was in World War II. He used to wear all the medals on the D-Day. I don't know if your grandfather probably
Yeah.
was as well. They
Yeah.
used to, you know, they did it with pride, didn't they? There was a pride around fighting for your country. Like they said, like people will die for medals. You know, men will go out there and die for that.
Mm.
And then it begs the question, okay, you know, if we was like pacifists and we said, okay, we're not going to fight, and you say you're not going to send your sons, then people would say, oh, James, okay, so you would be talking German now, you know, and you'd be part of this. You'd be part of a different place where there wasn't freedoms if everybody had your philosophy. What would you say to those type of people, James? What would the thinking be?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. You know, if we didn't fight, then yeah, Britain would look very, very different. But all these incidences through history, it's this perfect storm of Germany being in the situation they were economically, and everything had to be perfect for somebody like Hitler to come to power and to be able to mobilize a nation in that respect. You know, all these things started to align, and having a megalomaniac that stepped into the void, to this vacuum, and was able to do what he did. You know, hopefully we'd learn from history, but I'd argue we possibly haven't, unfortunately, because if it takes a different form, it may look very similar, but we can wrap it up in a different way and think it's very different. But fundamentally, it's exactly the same, isn't it?
And when you look at somebody like, you know, Hitler's background, and you see his, you know, family upbringing, the circumstances of Germany, the Great Depression after World War One, what was happening at that time, you know, it doesn't excuse anything what he was doing, but you start to understand how
the climate was ripe to have something like that happen.
Yeah,
it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's like everybody's very happy. You know, the economy's doing great. You know, the sense of national pride is absolutely where it should be. There's no way they're going to be thinking, oh, better go invade Poland then, haven't we?
Yeah, people can become very barbaric under certain circumstances.
Well, it's interesting. So I read something sort of relatively recently. They were talking about, you know, German troops that were, before the conflict, were just normal people. You know, at the end of the day, they had no intent to do harm to anybody else, but were victims of circumstance that this thing happened, that as soon as they had done it once, maybe twice, they became desensitized and convinced themselves that what they were doing was justified.
Yeah.
And then everything then starts to kind of skew in terms of the consciousness, and that individual that wouldn't have dreamt of doing those things prior to that happening, you know, maybe they'd seen a friend of theirs be killed, and you know, it was revenge or whatever, or they were so indoctrinated that they were broken down and then built back up to believe that this was justified, this was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I can imagine as well, James, it's just the fear of not following along for a lot of German people at the time, is if you don't go along with whatever the top people are saying, then you'll get killed. So you're just basically just following suit. You want to read these questions out, James? One from Nancy.
So Nancy, yeah, she said the same thing happened to my grandparents during the partition of India and Pakistan. I've read about that fairly recently as well. It's tragic. My grandmother witnessed horrors so traumatic she would scream and thrash in her sleep. Even decades later, she carried those memories until she passed in 2023. And it's that generational trauma, isn't it? I think that gets sort of filtered down through, that it influences your personality and your outlook on life generally. I mean, how can it not? It is that PTSD.
Yeah, sorry to hear that, Nancy. I've read about it as well, and it's just horrific. And we've been probably in the last couple of generations, especially in England since World War II, we've been sheltered from a lot of it, haven't we, in terms of seeing things firsthand, except for people who have actually served in places like Afghanistan and witnessed certain things. But you do become desensitized, don't you, to it? You see things on the news, you see kids get blown up, and after a while it doesn't have the same impact. But until you're there and it's happening to you, and my family, I've got half a family from Armenia, and they experienced sort of the Armenian genocide, where 1.5 million people were killed there, and there's still atrocities, and there's a lot of generational trauma.
Yeah.
And it really impacts them. The way they think about other nations is I would say understandable but primitive.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say because I haven't got that sort of ancestral trauma, but it feels like, on the base of it, the new generations in the opposing countries have got nothing to do with that genocide. They don't agree with it. This was a terrible act. But got more questions here, James, on this one. You want to read these ones out?
So
Eugene. So
I think a lot of what's going on within government and the MSM is scaremongering, a deliberate attempt to cause panic and upheaval. So what are the motivations then, Eugene? Interesting comment. What are the motivations for scaremongering? I mean, clearly what you said, John, in your opening statement was that, the military and weapons companies, anyone associated with conflict, are going to do quite well, aren't they? If you were going to be completely jaundiced and biased about it, to say that there's always profit in war.
Huge profit, it says here, James, nearly 2 trillion globally spent in 2023 on military spending. UK military budget 50 billion plus and rising, with new commitments for drones, cyber warfare, and nuclear submarines. US nearly 1 trillion, largest military budget ever. Russia and China increased spending sharply in response to NATO and regional instability. So nuclear arms race, 12,500 nuclear weapons worldwide. I think America and Russia have got most of them. They've got like about 5,000-6,000 each, which is just way more than anyone else. The UK holds around 225 in comparison. So US has got about 6,000. There is a Doomsday Clock out there, James. I don't know if you heard of it, but it's a clock that sort of they created after I think it was after Hiroshima, with the nuclear bomb there, to say how close we are to some sort of nuclear catastrophe in terms of warfare. And it started at around 7.5 minutes, and it's a countdown clock. You can look at it on the internet, but it's down at 89 seconds at the moment, which is the lowest it's ever been, which means it's the closest we've ever been to some type of nuclear catastrophe.
Even closer than the Bay of Pigs with Khrushchev and Kennedy.
Yeah, I think we're very, very close here. Robert, you want to read this one, James?
So Robert says World War III is inevitable. Okay, the underpinning driver is exponential population expansion on a planet with finite resources. This spectre has always been present, but ultimately herein is the problem. World War III has started, but the narrative hasn't caught up yet. I think he meant hasn't caught up yet. The real question is, how do we end wars? The answer may very well be with brutal, unthinkable force. After all, has there ever been a society stroke community in history that lived in peace without a police force? In 5,000 years, only 263 have seen peace globally.
So there's a bit to unpack there, isn't there? I think underpinning driver is exponential population expansion. Yeah, we have gone from, 100, I think it was about 1 billion to 8 billion in the last 150 years. So there has been a huge expansion in population, which definitely has an impact on global resources. Resources seem to be obviously a main component of this warfare. Probably the only reason people are interested in war in Ukraine is because I think it's like the 5th largest amount of precious metals in that area, which means that it's a heavy resource area for military conflict. People want to own it. People want to control it.
It's a strategic area, isn't it?
In terms of if we're overpopulated, I don't buy that. I think there's a systems problem. We throw away 1/3 of our food. There's so much space in the world for people to live, resources wise. With technology, things are getting quicker, easier. Yeah, we live on a finite planet potentially with certain fuel resources, but we live in an infinite universe. So there's ways and means around that finite argument. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's always going to be that way, because things change now, don't they, James, with this whole nuclear war situation? Because no one can really win, can they, James? That's the problem. When it comes to people saying about ending Russia losing this war in Ukraine, Russia's never going to lose this war in Ukraine. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to lose the war when you've got 5,000 nuclear warheads. You might have to compromise, or some side might have to compromise, but now nuclear is involved and it can be mutual annihilation. It's like a boxing match, James, where both of you have got, a gun or a bomb or a grenade in your pocket, and you're boxing and sparring, but at any time you could just drop a grenade and you can just blow the whole ring up.
Yeah. So
you can't really lose, can you?
But it becomes a standoff, doesn't it? That's the thing. It's like, nuclear disarmament was always off the table, because if somebody disarmed and then somebody else didn't, you'd have to have that mutual disarmament, and nobody would agree to do that. So whilst we all have nuclear weapons, you've got stalemate.
Yeah, they say it's
because there's always that fear of retaliation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what they say.
They exist so that they don't get used, which is an oxymoron. It seems to be this kind of counterintuitive thing, but it's like,
sounds like they exist to make money, more like, doesn't it? Imagine how much it costs to develop, to make it, to store it. It must, somebody's out of all of those numbers we just gave with the 2 trillion in spend. Where's that money going? BlackRock, Vanguard, is it going? And then all of a sudden you're destroying places like Ukraine, and all of these massive investment companies are already in there saying,
there's going to be a lot of nervous people.
We'll lend you money for the whole rebuild. So they're making money on the sale, production of the military equipment. Then they're making money, mopping up the blood, rebuilding. Then it moves to somewhere else, doesn't it? And you've got the the Israel thing, which is when people are saying is a modern genocide there, where people have been shifted out, and the creation of Israel is very controversial as well. But I'm trying to think
and then
about
you've got
in
the whole
terms of
anti-Semitic movement. It's like if you make a comment, then that can be used against you, so that then people don't comment or they don't have an opinion, either through ignorance. And, you know, I don't know the full ins and outs of it, you know, because, again, I haven't been following, but I know enough to know in that respect. But there seems to be certain kind of pockets of, you know, when you put in the article about, you know, where certain conflicts command headlines and others become yesterday's chip paper.
Yeah.
Or tomorrow's chip paper. And it's like, you know, where are we at as a society that these atrocities are going on? And yet we're more concerned just very recently about a CEO's having an affair with his co-worker or something like that, but then suddenly explodes and it's clickbait. And I think the social media, the media generally, is punctuated with these things that kind of distract us, that take us away. And this conflict has been going on for so long. There becomes a level of apathy, like we've already talked about, fatigue, and emotional fatigue, that it's like, it's so horrendous that we can't comprehend, we can't deal with it. You know, our everyday lives are such that we have to distract ourselves with something else so that we can survive. Because if we live with the heaviness of this that's going on, the horrendous atrocities that are occurring on a daily basis, we're seeing it on the news, it's being reported. But even the fact that it says this is unverified, or this has been verified, that it's not been fabricated, that these atrocities, back like with Syria, for example.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Assad regime, that they had to put on there that, you know, this has not been verified as bona fide footage, that it could have been created, it could have been staged, whatever. And it's like, but if this is real, this is actually happening now. And again, it's that level of desensitization that you look at it and you think, that can't possibly be, you know, we couldn't be inflicting these kind of, this genocidal atrocities in this modern era, that people are getting gassed in the streets. Couldn't possibly be happening. And yet there's the footage right there.
And yeah, and Nancy says, I agree, James, with what you said there. Nancy says the only ones who truly lose in war are innocent soldiers and civilians. Their families suffer. The ones who start the wars, they walk away untouched. I agree, Nancy. The, you know, innocent people that are being called up. I know with the people connected to someone in my family in those situations, you know, they was getting people turning up at workplaces, getting all the guys, you had to give your passports in. And if you're called up and you don't go, man, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
You know, you're fighting some war in a faraway land you have nothing to do with, which is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's a difficult one. And what you just said there, James, about the whole the things online, the videos, that poses an even greater, you know, question around war and propaganda in the social media age, because nowadays it's hard to know what's true or fake, isn't it, James? And people just don't really do any due diligence when they come to information. At the moment, there's this thing going around with the CEO of a company got caught at a Coldplay festival,
that's what I was talking
having
about.
an affair. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, there was a statement that came out. Well, they said it was his statement that they've run out, and this has been shared with thousands of comments and people saying this guy's this guy's that. What you look online for 10 seconds and, you know, the whole thing's fake. No, he didn't put out a statement. That's not his statement. The thing happened, but that's not the statement. But you see how easily intelligent people can jump on a bandwagon with propaganda, or if you've already got preconceived ideas, or you've got generational trauma and your family's constantly saying these people are this, these people are that, and then you watch footage in isolation, you start to build a picture, don't you, where
if you take the time to do that, if you have the bandwidth and you make the time to really start to scratch beneath the surface. But again, where everything is so transitory and throwaway, disposable, that it's like, oh, yeah, that's that, move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But unless you actually go, well, hold on a minute, do I know that to be true? And actually, do you care enough to figure that out? I mean, I read that, I'd seen it this morning, and I just kind of moved on from it. Now, none of us are perfect. We're going to make an opinion. We're going to have an emotional reaction, whatever. But I didn't go into any more detail or delve any deeper than that. It's just like, well, I mean, I kind of thought, well, poor couple, that two normal individuals have suddenly found themselves in this situation. I mean, the chances of it happening are pretty slim, but they've, on a very public platform, and it'll be forgotten tomorrow.
Yeah, it might be forgotten for everyone else, but I think he's a billionaire business person and he's married, so that could be very expensive. And it could ruin his life, definitely. And I think the other one was divorced. But in terms of the statement that came out, that was a fake statement from him. In terms of that individual circumstance, we could go into the morality of that. We don't know their individual situations of what they're doing, but it's just a demonstration of how people can believe what they read, they believe what they say. You listen to the news, or you listen to the heads and generals of your army, and they're being dictated to by somebody else who's got money.
Yeah,
and if the
there
word
could be a
filters
very
down,
clever spin.
Yeah, they could say, look, these people across the world are coming to kill us. They hate us. They're full of there's terrorism there, and you need to go and give your life to save. If you want to save your kids, you're going to have to go and give your life to this. And it could all be a BS story.
I mean, I would like to think with all of this, there is a counterbalance, that where we do have that, where we got deep fake and where those things can exist, that the breadth and depth of the internet can also disprove it, that the resources are there to actually start to do your own research and not to take it at face value. Now, there's going to be a percentage of the population that are just going to accept it and say, well, I'm being told that, so therefore I'll believe it. But I would like to think now that the inquiring minds would do some research and figure it out for themselves. Where we were only getting sort of 2 or 3 channels of media back in the day, as in, World War II propaganda, which would have been posters, leaflets, newspapers, etc., is a limited resource. So you weren't actually able to fact check it that vigorously. Whereas now we've got everything at our fingertips that we can do research. There's forums that people will post on, etc. to try and confirm.
People have got the capacity, James? I just can't see it. I just don't think people have got the capacity to.
Am I giving them the benefit, too much credit, and the benefit of the doubt?
And I think if you tell a lie enough times, it sort of becomes a truth. Trump's good at that, isn't he? He says something over and over again, and then it's something.
But I have to have a level of belief in that, otherwise,
what's the point?
There's no hope. There's no hope.
Yeah, I don't know if I've lost. I'm not really too sure if I've lost hope or not, to be honest, James. Nancy says people have truly lost it. I think Nancy's with me on this one. I'm really not. I might be with you, Nancy, on this one. And I say that with sadness. Empathy is vanishing. The worst part of being so open on social media is that no one seems to pause and consider the human cost. That man's wife is likely going through something unimaginable, and yet people are turning it into content. How cheap have we become to treat someone's personal tragedy like
there's a level of
trending
desensitization,
topic?
I think, but I
agree.
I want to. So me personally, I'd like to sort of counter. I think, we're again in danger of almost kind of being drawn into the same argument that, if we're sort of making damning indictments about society, that we've all lost empathy. I haven't lost empathy. You haven't lost empathy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Nancy hasn't lost empathy. So we can't then sort of cast that net over the whole of society and say we've lost our empathy. There are factions for sure. The people that are putting posts out on social media, are they a minority? Are they speaking for the majority?
Yeah.
Depends on who you follow. But I would counter that argument to say that actually I still believe in humanity. And I think I would like to think those type of individuals, for whatever reason, and we don't know their motivations, and we don't know their background or their mental situation, is that the majority of people are good and have good intentions.
I think that's a good point, James, to be honest, because only, 1% of people post on LinkedIn, or there's hardly any creators out there. You see all of this content, but it's only a 1% of people. It's still a lot of people, but 99% of people are consumers. So once you do see these things, out there, and you get trolls jumping on stuff as well, but it's not the majority, is it? If you speak to somebody on the street, more than likely everyone would say they just don't want to go to war. They don't want war. They don't want to be involved. They don't want to send their kids to war. It's a terrible thing. Most people will agree that this is not good. And when it comes to things like with this husband and wife, and the wife's, being in a very bad place, who knows? We don't know the situation with the guy and his wife, whether they're in a loving relationship or they're nearing the end of the relationship. They didn't expect to get caught.
No.
50% of divorce, of marriages.
There, by the grace of God,
sadly,
we all go. None of us, we're all fallible. None of us are perfect. And who are we to cast any kind of dispersion or judgment on anybody's lives?
Yeah. And it becomes clickbait, doesn't it? It becomes, if you want to create attention online, and we know that online is all about attention and distraction, and it's a massive war game, isn't it? To be able to, they say, the Russians are hacking into forums and changing people's minds and creating factions of people that are like far right or far left, and stirring the pot, getting people drawn up. So it's a huge, interesting societal dilemma, because people are very malleable in their thinking, aren't they? They can be easily, their brain can be permeated with.
It's understandable. Trash. It's how we make sense of the world. We have to categorize factions. We've got to say, well, they are Shiites, they're Muslim, they're Christian, they're, whatever, Hindu, etc., etc. We have to make sense of the world with labels and neatly pigeonholing aspects and parts of society so that we can kind of get an overview and like I said, make sense of the world. Where it becomes tricky is when that is just left in a very basic form, that you're not then sort of going into that category and delving a little deeper and saying, well, actually, these are human beings within that. And it's not just a throwaway comment, or whether, they're a terrorist, or, they're an extremist, whatever. It's quite easy, I think, to just categorize in that way and then move on and say, well, clearly they are whatever. And I've made up my mind, that's a decision based on that. So move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So are we able to start to think in terms of humanity and human beings and individuals as opposed to a collective noun for a group in society that's
Or a
easy
country
to
name.
dismiss, or anything? I mean, what is a country, for God's sake?
Yeah.
It's an area populated by human beings with cultural elements, with lots of different factors that are included in that makeup, but fundamentally human beings that are just trying to live their lives and survive and, take care of their families, or, just to live. And yet we're very quick to just go, well, that's the situation. I've made up my mind about that. I'm not going to think any more about it. I'm just going to move on.
Yeah, I think you could be right there, Jane. Because is the country thing just an illusion, a nation illusion? Is that is that something to galvanize people to go to war? Because if you look at the royal family as such in the UK, and I've just been to France and I went to a few historical places, and I look into their background, and then they're related to the UK royal family. Then they was part of the Spanish, the Italian, the Russian Tsars are related to the same type of people.
Well, we got German, in our lineage, so it's
German ancestry. So then when it comes to multinational corporations, there is no borders, is there? When it comes to making money, if you look at the US, they've got a lot of people with, like, Trump's wife she's I don't know if she's from Ukraine or somewhere like that in the Eastern Bloc somewhere. I know his daughter's husband is Jewish and got big ties to Israel. So there's obviously some power struggle there, or different alliances to different types of people. So it's not really that black and white, is it, to like make America great again? Because, well, what is America? What is that? What is the country? Who's really making the money out there? Do these people really care, or are these invisible lines, James?
I mean, utopia is, when you think about it, nationalism. If we all considered ourselves to be part of the world as a whole, I don't know that wars would exist, because they're predicated on threat to our identity, our way of life, our nationality.
Scarcity.
But it's the them and us situation that, you see it's hardwired into us. We are tribal by nature. And if somebody from outside that tribe comes in and threatens the community, then we're going to fight. We're going to fight back. But if everybody outside the community, outside of that tribe, is welcomed in, it sounds fantastical, doesn't it? But actually, if they're not perceived as a threat, just because they're not part of that community, because they exist outside of that, they're probably just looking to be part of something themselves. But they're an unknown entity, so there's that distrust, and there's that sort of, like, you can very easily say, well, they do things differently to us. People like us do things like this, and we are comfortable with that because it's the known. This individual represents the unknown, in which case we shouldn't trust them. We should be very wary of them, and anything they do should be incredibly critical, and we should be hypersensitive to what they do, because they could potentially be a threat. It's hardwired. But
it's definitely hardwired, isn't it, James?
We took that view of inclusivity, that they come in and actually they can be absorbed in, and very, they more than likely would be very happy to be welcomed into that community, to be part of it, as opposed to being a threat.
Yeah, it's a big difference between sort of Dunbar's number and 150 people in the tribe to this sort of modern day, I say modern day, in the last, say, 10,000 years of this very heavy class system. Throughout history, majority of people have been poor, with a very few set of elites. So, black people, white people be pitted against each other through racism, and both sets are coming from poverty, because it stops alliances for elites. Most people in India, Pakistan, were very impoverished with a few elites. So it's difficult, isn't it? It's a challenging one. So Nancy says, I might be wrong, but it feels like everything begins with extremism. Even in my own faith, Sikhism, that's often the root of the problems we face when it comes to religion. It's not belief that breaks us. It's when belief turns rigid, weaponized, and intolerant.
I agree.
I think that's a great point, Nancy. I think belief systems are so powerful, aren't they? A country name is a belief. A religion, again, is a belief. Once you have that belief, it changes your biochemistry, it changes your behaviors. If you don't believe something's possible, if you believe everybody's bad, then you walk around with a certain demeanor. But like you said, James, if you have the opposite view and you maybe statistically realize that 99% of people are okay, but you're being fed the 1% bad on the internet, then your actual belief system evolves and you feel differently, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, the fascinating thing for me, this is my personal opinion, the way my brain works, is belief systems that are there that you've grown up with. So if you've been brought up again back in that community, that you've had it since birth, this is your parents' religion, and you were brought up in that religion, as opposed to finding religion as an adult, for example, and it becoming something that you've kind of been exposed to. You can have a think about it, decide whether that's for you or not. And it may be a part of your life that, you've come to it and it's just happened at the right time. It's, again, this perfect situation. But does religion feel a bit like indoctrination if you've grown up in that religion, that you didn't have a choice? You were just, that was part of life, as opposed to finding it organically as an adult. It's just amusing in my head.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably, I don't know if we've covered religion on a different talk before, but there is, there's so many pros and cons, isn't there, to religion in terms of a guideline for how to live your life. But then you've got the indoctrination side, the control side, the fixed belief systems that doesn't evolve with new wisdom and knowledge. It's sort of set for an older time. When you have, I think anytime you have a rigid belief like that, that's sort of immovable, I think you're going to have problems personally. I don't think that's going to be the best way forwards. James, you want to get this one? We've got Eugene's back again.
So Eugene again, he can see it so clearly. And again, we've talked about this establishment pushing war because of its money-making potential. And he said that's plain and simple. I mean, you can't deny the fact.
I don't know what the establishment is, James. What is the establishment? Is it these murky elites
it's like
behind the door?
Well, this is again what we've been talking about. Who is the establishment?
Who is it?
Is it government? Is it
it's not people that work in government, is it? They're
weapons companies or the government that decide to buy weapons from these particular businesses, this industry. But he alludes to, how long it took. And I think it's until sort of fairly recently, isn't it? We were paying off war reparations to America, the debt that we had from the Second World War.
But I can imagine, James, you've probably got, I reckon we get somebody on who sells weapons in a company. I can imagine some engineer type of guy, like the Oppenheimer type, who was, they're just like engineers just building things, sort of like the person who just goes to war as a job and they join the army. They're not thinking about
the morality question, isn't it?
They're building something, but they're not really.
But in
they can be a nice person.
You're justifying, the means to an end in respect of its defense. It's keeping the peace as opposed to.
Yeah, you could justify it, couldn't you?
Exactly.
I can see how these people. So he says, we live in these cramped chicken coop homes, clutching onto freedoms
one for you.
We only think we have, but the truth is control is being put on us every single day. I know we don't and never will have a real choice. We're all just controlled and are the pawns who do their bidding. I think if you look at historically, there's a lot of truth to what Eugene's saying. in there. Yeah, we do live in, conditions. I've wrote about English land and the ownership model there.
Yeah.
It goes back 1,000 years to the Norman conquest, and things about giving away common land a few hundred years ago as well, and how that has created the modern sort of capitalist economy, and how we still are living through that, giving to landlords. It sort of says it in the name. If you've got a landlord, you're paying someone rent who owns assets, and that's pretty much how elite financials work, isn't it? You've got accumulation of assets that are increasing in value or inflating, and most of us are paying off debts and interest to pay for these, and it's funneling to the top. So Gary's economics talks a lot about that. People can say it's innovation, it's growth, it's GDP, that's what we need, or you could say this is a failed system going into oblivion and it can't carry on that way. So it's a very complex 150 years, I would say, James. A very, very tricky one. So we've got Paveen here. I have a hard time with my Asian family as I grew up Christian and they are Muslim. But the real issue is that I've been to Israel and Palestine and have friends on both religions. But the Muslims exaggerate and insist babies are being ripped from bodies. That's not true. Murdered, yes, but killing is on both sides. And yes, there will be a war, unemployment, and capitalists who really just want to earn on the back of others.
Wow.
To be honest, there's probably anecdotal stories on both sides of what's true. There are, people in the British armies that do terrible things. There was awful things that happened after World War One through, Western allies, raping and pillaging loads of German people, or the opposite side, Italians, many murders. A lot of bad stuff happens in war. And yeah, when you've got fixed belief systems and you believe something's black and white, good or bad, or if something happens to you and it's a different side that's killed your family, I can imagine you'd sort of lose your mind, don't you? And you just want to kill other people, and it perpetuates forever. It's a challenging. It's easy for us to sit here and say it because we're not in it, are we?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. Another one from Paveen. All these dead, yet all those earning, just like with COVID, all those companies who gained with war. There are all the supplies to soldiers, weapons, ultimately rebuilding Gaza, Los Angeles. No thanks. Yeah, I agree. COVID is a great example, James. We'll leave it at COVID because it was a global shutdown. It sort of appeared as quickly as it disappeared. It pretty much was the biggest wealth transfer in human history from normal people to elites. Many elites profited, billionaires became a lot richer. Stock prices and things like that went through the roof, and people that held assets. So, and again, it looks like it was some type of lab leak from probably biological weapon engineering, doesn't it? Which has never come out, but it looks like it's heading that way.
Will we ever know? Will we ever know? Right, on that note, that cliffhanger, we shall leave it there.
Yeah, will World War III come along? Let's hope not. But
yeah,
James, I'm not too sure. I think it could do.
The debate will continue. The debate will continue.
Anyway, guys, thank you for joining and
thanks for your questions. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.